Welcome to Alchemy of Thought. Today we're exploring one of the world's most enduring fairy tales, Beauty and the Beast by Jeanne-Marie Leprince de Beaumont, first published in 1756. This recording is based on the original public domain text, carefully restored for modern listening. While the language has been lightly polished for clarity, the story, dialogue, and spirit of Beaumont's work have been faithfully preserved. Whether you're revisiting a childhood favorite or discovering the original tale for the first time, I hope you'll settle in, listen with an open and curious mind, and enjoy this timeless classic. Let's begin. Beauty and the Beast. Jeanne-Marie Leprince de Beaumont. There was once a very rich merchant who had 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters. Being a man of sense, he spared no cost for their education, but gave them all kinds of masters. His daughters were extremely handsome, especially the youngest. When she was little, everybody admired her and called her the Little Beauty, and as she grew up, she still went by the name of Beauty, which made her sisters very jealous. The youngest, as she was handsome, was also better than her sisters. The 2 eldest had a great deal of pride because they were rich. They gave themselves ridiculous airs and would not visit other merchants' daughters, nor keep company with any but persons of quality. They went out every day upon parties of pleasure, balls, plays, concerts, and laughed at their youngest sister, because she spent the greatest part of her time in reading good books. As it was known that they were to have great fortunes, several eminent merchants made their addresses to them, but the 2 eldest said they would never marry unless they could meet with a duke, or at least an earl. Beauty very civilly thanked those who courted her, and told them she was too young yet to marry, but chose to stay with her father a few years longer. All at once the merchant lost his whole fortune, except for a small country house at a great distance from town. With tears in his eyes, he told his children they must go there and work for their living. The 2 eldest answered that they would not leave the town, for they had several lovers who, they were sure, would be glad to have them though they had no fortune. But in this they were mistaken. Their lovers slighted and forsook them in their poverty. As they were not beloved on account of their pride, everybody said, "They do not deserve to be pitied. We are glad to see their pride humbled. Let them go and give themselves quality airs in milking the cows and minding their dairy." But they added, "We are extremely concerned for Beauty. She was such a charming, sweet-tempered creature, spoke so kindly to poor people, and was of such an affable, obliging disposition." Several gentlemen would still have married her, though they knew she had not a penny, but she told them she could not think of leaving her poor father in his misfortunes, and was determined to go with him into the country, to comfort and attend him. Poor Beauty was at first sadly grieved at the loss of her fortune, but she said to herself, "Were I to cry ever so much, that would not make things better. I must try to make myself happy without a fortune." When they came to their country house, the merchant and his 3 sons applied themselves to husbandry and tillage. Beauty rose at 4 in the morning, made haste to have the house clean, and prepared breakfast for the family. At first she found it very difficult, for she had never been accustomed to work as a servant, but in less than 2 months she grew stronger and healthier than ever. After she had finished her work, she read, played on the harpsichord, or sang while she spun. Her 2 sisters, on the contrary, did not know how to spend their time. They rose at 10 o'clock, sauntered about the house all day, and lamented the loss of their fine clothes and fashionable acquaintances. "Only look at our youngest sister," they would say to one another. "What a poor, stupid, mean-spirited creature she is, to be contented with such an unhappy situation." The good merchant was of a very different opinion. He knew that Beauty outshone her sisters, not only in her person, but in her mind. He admired her humility, industry, and patience, for her sisters not only left all the work of the house to her, but insulted her continually. The family had lived about a year in this retirement when the merchant received a letter informing him that a vessel, on board of which he had goods, had safely arrived. This news nearly turned the heads of the 2 eldest daughters. Immediately they began flattering themselves with the hope of returning to town, for they had grown quite weary of country life. When they saw their father preparing for his journey, they begged him to bring them new gowns, caps, rings, and every sort of fashionable trifle. Beauty asked for nothing. She thought to herself that whatever money her father might receive would scarcely be enough to purchase everything her sisters desired. "What will you have, Beauty?" asked her father. "Since you are so kind as to think of me," she answered, "be so kind as to bring me a rose, for as none grow hereabouts, they are a kind of rarity." It was not that Beauty cared particularly for a rose. She merely wished to ask for something, lest her sisters should accuse her of trying to appear more modest than they. The good merchant set out upon his journey. But when he reached the port, lawsuits concerning his merchandise delayed him, and after much trouble and expense, he found himself returning home almost as poor as when he had left. He was within 30 miles of his own house, thinking of the pleasure he would have in seeing his children again, when, passing through a large forest, he lost his way. It rained and snowed terribly. The wind blew with such violence that it threw him twice from his horse. Night came on, and he began to fear he would either perish from cold and hunger or be devoured by the wolves, whose howls echoed all around him. Suddenly, looking down a long avenue of trees, he perceived a light in the distance. As he drew nearer, he discovered that it came from a magnificent palace, illuminated from top to bottom. The merchant returned thanks to God for this unexpected deliverance and hastened toward the palace. To his great surprise, he found no one in the courtyards. His horse followed him into a large open stable, where it immediately found fresh hay and oats. Nearly exhausted with hunger, the poor animal began eating eagerly. The merchant tied the horse to the manger and walked toward the house. Entering a vast hall, he found a blazing fire and a table magnificently laid for supper, though only a single place had been set. Wet through from the rain and snow, he approached the fire to dry himself. "I hope," he said aloud, "that the master of the house, or one of his servants, will excuse the liberty I take. I suppose it cannot be long before someone appears." He waited a considerable time. The clock struck 11. Still no one came. At last, hunger overcame ceremony. He took a roasted chicken from the table and ate it in only a few mouthfuls, trembling all the while. Afterward, he drank a few glasses of wine, and feeling somewhat more at ease, crossed several magnificent apartments filled with splendid furniture until he reached a bedchamber. There stood an excellent bed. Being thoroughly exhausted and seeing that it was now well past midnight, he concluded that the wisest course was to shut the door and retire for the night. When the merchant awoke the next morning, it was nearly 10 o'clock. As he prepared to rise, he was astonished to discover a handsome new suit of clothes laid out for him in place of his own, which had been completely spoiled by the storm. "Surely," he said to himself, "this palace belongs to some kind fairy who has seen my distress and taken pity upon me." Looking out the window, he saw no trace of the snowstorm. Instead, the grounds were filled with delightful bowers woven together by the most beautiful flowers he had ever beheld. Returning to the great hall, where he had supped the previous evening, he found a cup of hot chocolate prepared for him upon a small table. "Thank you, good Madam Fairy," he said aloud, "for your thoughtful kindness. I am deeply obliged to you for all your favors." After finishing his breakfast, he went in search of his horse. As he passed through a rose arbor, he remembered Beauty's request. Thinking only of his daughter, he reached out and gathered a branch on which several beautiful roses bloomed. No sooner had he broken the branch than a tremendous noise echoed through the garden. Before him appeared a frightful beast, whose terrible voice made the merchant think he would die of fear. "You are very ungrateful," said the beast. "I saved your life by receiving you into my castle, and in return you steal my roses, which I value more than anything in the world. You shall die for it. I give you only a quarter of an hour to prepare yourself and say your prayers." The merchant fell upon his knees and lifted his hands. "My lord," he cried, "I beg you to forgive me. I had no intention of offending you. I gathered the rose only because one of my daughters begged me to bring her one." "My name is not my lord," replied the beast. "My name is Beast. I do not care for compliments. I like people to speak honestly, so do not imagine your flattering words will move me." "But you say you have daughters." His voice softened, though only slightly. "I will forgive you upon one condition." The merchant scarcely dared breathe. "One of your daughters must come here willingly and suffer in your place. I will hear no arguments. Go home. But swear that if your daughter refuses to die for you, you yourself will return within 3 months." The merchant had no thought of sacrificing one of his children to such a monster. Yet the promise gave him one precious gift, the chance to see them all once more. So he swore the oath. The beast then said, "You shall not leave my castle empty-handed. Return to the chamber where you slept. There you will find a great empty chest. Fill it with whatever you value most, and I shall see that it is carried safely to your home." With these words, the beast disappeared. "If I must die," the merchant said to himself, "I shall at least leave something behind for my poor children." He returned to the chamber and found a great quantity of gold. He filled the chest until it would hold no more, locked it securely, mounted his horse, and left the palace with far greater sorrow than the joy with which he had first entered it. The horse seemed to know the way without guidance. In only a few hours the merchant reached his home. His children hurried to embrace him, but instead of greeting them with happiness, he looked upon them with tears in his eyes. Holding out the branch of roses, he said, "Here, Beauty, these are for you. But little do you know how dearly they are likely to cost your unhappy father." Then he told them everything that had happened. Immediately, the two eldest sisters burst into loud lamentations. Yet even in their grief they found fault with Beauty. "See what has come of her foolish pride," they cried. "She would not ask for gowns or jewels as we did. No, she wished to distinguish herself with a rose. Now she has become the death of our poor father, and she cannot even shed a tear." Beauty answered quietly, "Why should I weep? It would be useless. My father shall not suffer on my account. If the beast will accept one of his daughters, then I will willingly give myself up to all his fury. I shall even be happy if my death saves my father's life and proves how dearly I love him." "No, sister," cried her 3 brothers, "that shall never be. We will go ourselves to find the monster, and either kill him or perish in the attempt." "My sons," replied the merchant, "do not imagine such a thing. The beast's power is too great. I have no hope that you could overcome him." Turning to Beauty, he continued, "I am touched beyond words by your generous offer, but I cannot accept it. I am old and have only a few years left to lose. I regret them only for your sake, my dear children." "Indeed, father," said Beauty, "you shall not go to the palace without me. You cannot prevent me from following you." No argument could change her mind. She remained steadfast in her resolve. Her sisters, however, secretly rejoiced, for Beauty's goodness and gentle disposition had long filled them with envy. The merchant was so overcome by the thought of losing his beloved daughter that he completely forgot the chest of gold. But that night, when he entered his chamber and closed the door, he found it standing beside his bed. He resolved to keep this unexpected fortune a secret, for he knew his daughters would immediately wish to return to the city, and he himself had no desire to leave the quiet country life. Beauty alone shared the secret. She also told her father that during his absence 2 gentlemen had come to court her sisters. She begged him to give his consent to both marriages and provide each sister with a suitable fortune. Such was Beauty's goodness that she forgave them wholeheartedly for all the unkindness they had shown her. When the day of departure arrived, her sisters rubbed their eyes with onions to force themselves to cry. Her brothers needed no such trick. Their grief was sincere. Beauty alone shed no tears, fearing only to increase the sorrow of those she loved. The horse once again took the direct road to the mysterious palace. As evening fell, they saw it shining brilliantly, just as the merchant had described. Without guidance, the horse walked into the stable. The merchant and Beauty entered the great hall. There they found a magnificent supper already prepared. This time the table was laid for 2. The merchant could scarcely eat, so full was his heart with sorrow. Beauty, wishing to comfort him, forced herself to appear cheerful and encouraged him to share the meal. Yet inwardly she thought, "Perhaps the beast intends to fatten me before he devours me, since he provides such excellent food." When supper ended, a tremendous noise echoed through the palace. The merchant burst into tears. He embraced his daughter, believing the beast had come to claim her. Beauty trembled at the sight of the dreadful creature. Nevertheless, she gathered her courage. The beast looked at her and asked, "Did you come here willingly?" "Yes," Beauty replied, scarcely able to speak. "You are very good," said the beast, "and I thank you. Honest man, you shall leave tomorrow morning, but never return here again. Farewell, Beauty." "Farewell, beast," she answered. The monster immediately withdrew. The merchant clasped his daughter tightly. "Oh, my child," he cried, "I am frightened beyond measure. Come home with me. Let me remain here instead." "No, father," Beauty answered with quiet determination. "You must leave in the morning and trust me to the care of Providence." That night they both retired to their rooms. Each believed sorrow would keep them awake until dawn. Instead, they fell almost immediately into a deep sleep. The next morning, before the merchant departed, Beauty told him of the dream she had seen during the night. A beautiful lady had appeared to her and said, "Beauty, I am pleased with your willingness to sacrifice yourself for your father. Your generosity shall not go unrewarded." Though the dream offered him a little comfort, the merchant could not keep back his tears when the moment came to leave his beloved daughter. As soon as he had gone, Beauty sat alone in the great hall and wept. Yet she possessed too much courage to surrender to despair. She commended herself to Providence and resolved to spend peacefully whatever little time remained to her, firmly believing that the beast would surely devour her before another day had passed. Until then, she determined to explore the magnificent castle. Every room she entered filled her with fresh wonder. At length, she came to a door upon which were written these words, "Beauty's apartment." She opened it eagerly. The splendor within almost dazzled her. But what delighted her most was not the rich furniture, it was the great library. Beside it stood a beautiful harpsichord, together with a collection of music. "Then," she said to herself, "they do not intend that I should suffer from idleness." A moment later another thought occurred to her. Had I only been expected to remain here for a single day, they would never have prepared all this for me. The reflection gave her fresh courage. She entered the library and opened the first book she found. Written inside, in letters of gold, were these words, "Welcome, Beauty. Banish fear. You are queen and mistress here. Speak your wishes, speak your will. Swift obedience meets them still." With a sigh, she said, "There is nothing I desire so much as to see my poor father and know how he fares." She had scarcely spoken before her eyes were drawn toward a large looking-glass. To her astonishment, it revealed her father's house. She saw him arrive with a sorrowful countenance. Her sisters hurried out to meet him. Though they tried to appear full of grief, the satisfaction they secretly felt at Beauty's absence was plainly written upon their faces. A moment later, the vision disappeared. Beauty could not help admiring this fresh proof of the beast's kindness. At noon, she found dinner already prepared. As she ate, delightful music filled the room, though no musician could be seen. When evening came, she sat down to supper. Just then she heard the heavy footsteps of the beast approaching. Her courage almost failed her. "Beauty," said the beast, "will you allow me to watch you while you sup?" "That is as you please," she answered, trembling. "No," replied the beast, "you alone are mistress here. If my presence troubles you, you have only to command me to leave, and I shall go immediately. But tell me honestly, do you think me very ugly?" "That is true," Beauty answered after a moment. "I cannot tell a lie. But I believe you are very good-natured." "So I am," replied the beast. "But besides my ugliness, I have very little sense. I know well enough that I am only a poor, dull creature." "It is no sign of folly to know that," said Beauty. "A fool never recognizes his own ignorance." "Then eat your supper, Beauty," said the beast, "and try to make yourself happy in your palace. Everything here belongs to you, and I should be very unhappy if you were not content." "You are very kind," Beauty replied. "When I consider your goodness, your appearance no longer seems so dreadful." "My heart is good," answered the beast, "but I am still only a monster." "There are many among mankind," said Beauty, who deserve that name far more than you. I would rather trust someone such as you than those who wear a human face while hiding a treacherous, selfish, or ungrateful heart." "If I possessed enough wit," said the beast, "I would pay you a fine compliment to thank you, but I am so dull that I can only tell you I am deeply grateful." Beauty finished her supper almost free from the terror she had first felt. Then the beast asked quietly, "Beauty, will you be my wife?" She was so startled that she could not answer at once. She feared that refusing him might provoke his anger. At last she spoke, "No, beast." The beast gave a long, sorrowful sigh. The sound echoed through the entire palace. For a moment Beauty thought she would faint with fright. Then, in the saddest voice she had yet heard from him, he simply said, "Then, farewell, Beauty." Without another word he left the room. Several times he turned back to look at her before disappearing from sight. When Beauty found herself alone, her fear slowly gave way to compassion. "Alas," she said to herself, "it is 1,000 pities that anything so good-natured should be so very ugly." Thus passed the first evening. Beauty soon settled into a peaceful life within the enchanted palace. For 3 months she wanted for nothing. Each evening, at precisely 9 o'clock, the beast came to dine with her. Their conversations were simple and sensible. He never attempted wit or cleverness, yet everything he said revealed honesty, humility, and kindness. With each passing day, Beauty discovered new virtues in him. Little by little she became so accustomed to his appearance that she no longer dreaded his visits. Indeed, she often found herself looking at the clock, wondering whether it was nearly 9. There was only one thing that troubled her. Every night, before taking his leave, the beast would ask the same question, "Beauty, will you be my wife?" And every night she answered, "No, beast." One evening Beauty said to him, "Beast, you make me very unhappy. I wish I could consent to marry you, but I am too sincere to make you believe that will ever happen. I shall always esteem you as my friend. Try to be satisfied with that." "I must be," replied the beast, "for, alas, I know too well my own misfortune. Yet I love you with the tenderest affection. Still, I ought to think myself happy that you are willing to remain here. But promise me one thing. Promise that you will never leave me." Beauty blushed. She had often looked into the enchanted mirror and seen how deeply her father mourned her absence. The desire to see him once again had become almost impossible to resist. "I could indeed promise never to leave you forever," she answered, "but I so greatly long to see my father that I fear I shall die of grief if you refuse me." The beast was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, "I would rather die myself than cause you the least unhappiness. You shall go to your father. You may remain with him. And poor beast," he paused before finishing, "poor beast will die of grief." "No," cried Beauty, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you too well to become the cause of your death. I promise faithfully that I will return. You have shown me that my sisters are married and my brothers have joined the army. My father is alone. Allow me to stay with him only 1 week." "You shall be there tomorrow morning," replied the beast. "But remember your promise. When you wish to return, place your ring upon the table before you go to bed. You will awaken here. Farewell, Beauty." As always, the beast sighed deeply when he wished her good night. This time, however, the sound pierced Beauty's heart. She went to bed sorrowful, grieving not for herself, but for the lonely creature she was leaving behind. When she awoke the next morning, she found herself once more in her father's house. A little bell stood beside her bed. She rang it. The maid entered the room. The instant she saw Beauty, she uttered a loud cry of astonishment. Hearing the noise, the merchant rushed upstairs. At the sight of his beloved daughter, he nearly fainted with joy. He clasped her in his arms and held her there for a long time, unable to speak. When at last the first happiness of their reunion had passed, Beauty prepared to rise. She suddenly remembered that she had brought no clothes with her. The maid smiled. "Miss," she said, "a large trunk has appeared in the adjoining room. It is filled with gowns embroidered with gold and adorned with diamonds." Beauty immediately thanked the good beast in her heart for thinking of her comfort even while she was away. She chose the simplest dress from among them, and resolved to give all the others to her sisters. No sooner had she spoken the thought aloud than the trunk disappeared. Her father explained that the beast wished her to keep every one of the gowns herself. At that very moment, both the trunk and its treasures returned exactly where they had been. Beauty's arrival filled the whole household with joy. Her father could scarcely bear to let her out of his sight. Her brothers returned as soon as they heard she had come home. The eldest had become an officer in the army, and the youngest served in the navy. Both embraced their sister with the greatest affection. Her sisters also came to visit. They appeared delighted to see Beauty again. Yet beneath their smiles lay secret envy. Beauty looked more beautiful than ever. Her gentle manners had become even more graceful, and happiness seemed to shine from her countenance. One evening, the eldest sister said to the second, "See how fortunate Beauty is. Even after living with that dreadful beast, she has become richer and happier than we are." "It is unbearable," replied the second. "Perhaps we can prevent her from returning." Together they devised a plan. When the 7 days had nearly passed, they pretended to be overwhelmed with grief at the thought of losing her again. They embraced her, wept, and begged her to remain only 1 week longer. Beauty's tender heart could not bear to distress them. At last she consented. Yet almost immediately she began to reproach herself. "Poor beast," she thought, "how unhappy he must be while waiting for me. I am indeed very ungrateful." For she now understood that she loved him deeply, not because he was handsome, not because he was witty, not because he was a prince. She loved him because he was kind. That night, after she had remained beyond the promised time, she dreamed she was walking through the gardens of the enchanted palace. There, beneath a grove of trees, lay the beast, stretched upon the ground. He seemed scarcely alive. In a faint voice he said, "You have forgotten your promise, Beauty. I die content, since your happiness has cost me my life." Beauty awoke in tears. "How could I have been so cruel?" she cried. "I believed I felt only friendship for the beast, but now I know. I cannot bear the thought of losing him." Without delaying another moment, she placed her ring upon the table beside her bed. As she lay down, she said, "I beg your forgiveness, dear beast. I hope I am not too late." Hardly had she closed her eyes before she fell asleep. Beauty awoke the next morning. She found herself once more in the enchanted palace. Without stopping to look around, she hurried through the rooms, calling, "Beast! Beast!" No answer came. Her heart filled with dread. Remembering the dream, she ran into the garden. There, beneath the very grove she had seen in her sleep, she found the beast lying motionless upon the ground. She threw herself beside him. Feeling his heart still beating, she hastened to fetch water from a nearby stream and sprinkled it over him. The beast slowly opened his eyes. "You forgot your promise," he said faintly. "The grief of losing you had resolved me to die of hunger, but since I have had the happiness of seeing you once more, I die content." "No, dear beast," cried Beauty, weeping. "You shall not die. You shall live, to become my husband. I thought I felt only friendship for you, but the sorrow I have endured since leaving you has shown me that I cannot live without you." Scarcely had Beauty spoken these words when the entire palace blazed with light. Fireworks burst into the sky. Music filled the air. Everywhere she looked, signs of celebration appeared, yet she scarcely noticed them. Her eyes remained fixed upon the beast. Before her, the monstrous form disappeared. In its place stood a handsome prince, who knelt before her and thanked her for breaking the enchantment under which he had long suffered. Although the prince possessed every grace that could inspire admiration, Beauty found herself almost more astonished than delighted. Before she could speak, the beautiful lady from her dream appeared. "Beauty," said the fairy, "you have chosen virtue over appearance and goodness over vanity. You deserve to find the reward of your wisdom. This prince was condemned by an evil fairy to remain in the form of a beast until a maiden freely consented to marry him. Many admired his rank, many admired his wealth, but none could see beyond his outward appearance. You alone judged him by his heart." The fairy then turned toward Beauty's sisters. "You have allowed jealousy and pride to govern your lives. Become statues." Instantly they were transformed into figures of stone before the palace. "But," continued the fairy, "I do not deprive you entirely of feeling. You shall remain at the gates of this palace until you witness the full repentance of your faults. It may be a long time. It may even last forever. for there is nothing more difficult than to conquer envy and selfishness. The fairy then placed Beauty's hand in that of the prince. Immediately the prince's kingdom assembled to celebrate their marriage. Beauty's father rejoiced beyond measure. Her brothers shared in the happiness. Even her sisters, though imprisoned in silent reflection, could not help witnessing the reward that goodness had earned. Beauty and the prince lived together in perfect happiness for many years. Their happiness rested not upon beauty or riches alone, but upon virtue, kindness, and steadfast love. Thank you for listening to Beauty and the Beast. If you enjoyed this classic, you'll find many more restored public domain stories, myths, philosophy, and forgotten works here on Alchemy of Thought. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, remain curious, remain discerning, and keep exploring the stories and ideas that have shaped our world.